Hello and welcome to the Primary Maths Podcast, the show where we talk all things primary maths. I'm Jon Cripwell, and today I've been joined by my fantastic colleague Michelle Windridge to talk all about early years maths. Michelle is Twinkl's National Education Lead for school-based EYFS, and we're going to have a conversation all about what maths looks like and maybe what maths doesn't look like in an early years setting. Michelle, welcome to the show.
Hi, Jon. Lovely to be here.
I know you're a huge fan, Michelle, who never misses an episode, and I know that you've also been badgering me for weeks to come on. So
you've been begging me for weeks, yeah. I finally found a time in my diary.
Yeah. I'm glad that we could squeeze you in. But in all honesty, EYFS maths is an area that for some maths leads, maybe some school leaders, is possibly an area that they are less familiar with for one reason or another. Not in all cases, of course, but no. I know for myself, often when I work with maths leads, they're often not based in EYFS for some reason. I would love to know why that is. There must be a reason, but I suppose EYFS is normally only one or two teachers out of the whole school, perhaps, if you're in a a larger school. So maybe it's just a statistics thing, but the curriculum in early years can look a little bit different. Well, does look a little bit different from the rest of school. So it'd be great just to delve into that a little bit today. I promise, Michelle, that this will be episode one of many focusing on early years maths. So
because it's that important, at least 10 episodes.
But it is that important, genuinely. So I'm happy to spend the time on it. So, Michelle, as you know, as an avid fan, I always ask, what was your background? I mean, what was maths like for you at school, first of all? Are you a big maths fan?
I was never a big maths fan. Sorry, Jon. I know that's painful to hear, but never a big maths fan at school. Really struggled. My mum, I was fortunate, my mum hired me a tutor to get me through my GCSEs with maths. Not very confident at all, just didn't really get it. Which is why I think when I became a teacher, it was so important for me to make sure that I got maths right. And I had to work a little bit harder to make sure that I was meeting the needs of the children, because I didn't want them to have the same experiences that I had at school. And we know that when children start school, parents quite often will come with the attitude of, oh, they're not very good at maths, so I was never good at maths, as if that's the end of the story. Whereas actually, it's really important that as EYFS practitioners, as teachers, that we work to change that for the child and for the parents as well.
I could not agree more. No, absolutely. So, Michelle, just very quickly then, so after you left school with your GCSE in maths, thanks to that tutor and lots of hard work, what was your sort of journey up until this point then, just as a quick background for the listeners?
So I did a 4-year BEd, which doesn't exist anymore, but it was fabulous. And interestingly enough, part of that was doing the QTS skills in maths was one of them. And that was something I was really nervous about as well, because I still had and carried that maths anxiety with me. So that was a challenge. Spent 25 years. I've got a good moisturiser. I know I don't look old enough. I spent 25 years as a reception, year 1, year 2 teacher, but mostly in early years, mostly in reception and nursery, working for the local authority, supporting other schools to raise the standard of their earlier settings, and then assistant head as well. And then the last few years I've worked in teacher training in HE, which has been fantastic as well, sharing the passion and passing the baton over for the next generation of educators.
Yeah, absolutely. Such an important job. And now, of course, at Twinkl. And what does your role involve here?
So for Twinkl, I'm the national lead, as you said, for school-based early years. So working up and down the country, supporting our early years teachers and practitioners to be the best that they can be, really, and to be kind to themselves, and just sharing what good practice looks like and how we can support each other and helping each other. So it's a fantastic job. I get to visit schools lots, which is lovely.
Absolutely. So let's get straight into it then. EYFS maths is something that even confident maths leads sometimes, as I mentioned earlier, can find a little bit of a mystery because there's a perception and a reality, I suppose, that it looks quite different or potentially looks quite different to the rest of the school. So I just thought it'd be good for us to have a conversation really about what early years maths really looks like, and how it sort of connects to what comes later. So first of all, for those who are less familiar, could you just talk to us about the curriculum for early years? Because it's made up of obviously some statutory documents and also some guidance, isn't it? So for people who are less familiar, what does that look like?
Yeah, so we've got the EYFS, the Earliest Foundation Stage Framework, which is statutory, and that goes from birth as well. So the same curriculum runs from birth until the end of reception. Good practice would be a smooth transition from the EYFS curriculum to the Key Stage 1 national curriculum. So it wouldn't just cut off at the end of reception and change. But that's a podcast for another day, maybe. And then we've also got Development Matters, which supports practitioners. It's not statutory, but it supports practitioners in making sure that they are providing activities and learning opportunities that really are appropriate for the age group. So if you've got a child that's with a childminder or in a PVI nursery setting that's 8 months old, they'll be following the same curriculum that a child in reception is, but obviously to their level and developmentally appropriate for them. But ultimately, that's what the EYFS curriculum is.
Okay, and within the early years framework, will we find a section on maths, or is
No,
it
it's
something
not
else?
important enough. No, sorry. No. Yes, we will find a section on maths, and it's fantastic because when you read the framework and you read the guidance, it really tells us the importance of hands-on real life experiences for our children, which is where the foundations of maths are really developed and our children need before they get to Key Stage 1. So we're thinking about number, we're thinking about shape, space, measure, we're thinking about what these things look like in our everyday lives and how we can encourage our children to explore these in a practical way through their play rather than sitting down at desks doing worksheets. They need to be able to explore, they need to be able to take risks and find out what one block and another block, how many there are altogether, through their play and through trial and error as well, before they can move on to the more formal learning later on.
Which I would hope would also include lots of the things that you just mentioned as well in terms of any good practice, really. But yeah, there's definitely the perception, I think, and we will come to this in a moment, that there aren't any formal lessons as such, maybe in some early year settings when it comes to maths. But we'll touch on that in just a moment, and you can challenge that, or we can have a chat about that. But in terms of the curriculum then for reception, particularly if we focus on reception, the the framework changed a few years ago, and I know it's had some updates since, but the focus really for the reception year is very much on the number system to 10, isn't it? And how numbers work between 0 and 10, and that strikes me as something that's very easy to say,
Yeah.
but actually, if you want that sort of deep conceptual understanding of it, it is quite a tricky concept to understand when you're 4 or 5 years old.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, why do you think the framework changed a few years ago to focus more on numbers just up to 10? Because previously it was numbers to 20, is that right? And then an understanding of numbers up to 100,
Up
something
to
like that.
100. Yeah, definitely. And that's a really good question. I think the change was needed because quite often we would assess children in early years, especially at the end of reception, based on their understanding, based on their ability to memorize number facts. And actually, we know that that isn't the good foundation of a mathematician and someone that's going to continue to succeed in maths throughout the rest of their primary and secondary journey. We want children to have a real deep understanding of each of the numbers to 10. And again, that sounds quite straightforward when you say it really quickly, but We want children to understand the oneness of one. So what does one look like? It could be one clap, it could be one stamp, it could be one apple, it could be one orange. They are all one, they all mean the same. It's one object or one movement, one sound. And the same with numbers up to 10. So what's the 10ness of 10? How could it look in different scenarios? How could it be grouped into two in different ways? So it was really an important change because it provided us as educators with that guidance that we needed to make sure that children knew their numbers 1 to 10 really well. And it's a lot more important than just learning to count to 10 and maybe count backwards from 10 as well, but really understand in depth what all of those numbers to 10 mean and how they can look in lots of different ways as well.
Yeah, and for me, I think it really emphasised what we've been talking about with teaching for mastery for a number of years,
Yeah.
which is that in order to go quicker later, you need to spend a lot more time going slowly earlier on, so that there's a deeper understanding of things, and that will help to speed up the process of learning later. But also, just removing some of the content from the curriculum just allows more time to be spent on it, rather than that
Yeah.
feeling that you're rushing through all the time. And as we're recording, we're expecting possibly this week the curriculum and assessment review to finally be published from Becky Francis's team, and there'll be lots of updates on the Twinkl website. If you go and have a look at QE Insights, or just the Twinkl main page, when that lands, that there'll be loads of information for anybody who wants any updates on the curriculum and assessment review. But we're hoping very much from a primary maths point of view that actually that work that was done with the EYFS framework, where things were simplified a little bit and slimmed down a little bit, will follow through into the rest of the curriculum. Because for me, that transition from reception into year one in terms of content and knowledge, particularly in maths, I know in other areas as well, is huge. The leap now to go from the end of reception to the end
Yeah.
of year one is enormous. So it'd be great to see that sort of acknowledged in the government's plans.
Yeah, definitely. And having sort of worked through when the guidance did change in early years, it was wonderful to just feel like you had more time to enjoy maths. So I know you said that we're going to talk a little bit about sort of formal lessons and non-formal
Well,
learning in
yeah,
early years.
let's do that.
But
Let's do that now, Michelle. So we'll come to the environment in a moment, if that's all right, and
yeah.
continuous provision and that sort of thing. But what might maths look like in if we were coming to see a maths session in reception?
So it would very much depend on the time of year in reception. So a maths session in autumn, the start of autumn, would look very different to the end of summer in reception. You would expect it to, as the children develop and progress. It can look a bit chaotic. So if you are in a school where your maths lead is from maybe upper key stage 2 and has got little understanding of early years maths, it can you sometimes feel like you're having to justify what's happening. There can be lots going on. I am a firm believer, and some people disagree with this, and that's fine. I'm happy to be challenged, but I'm a firm believer in balance in how you teach maths within reception and the reception year, that there does need to be some adult directed teaching time. It's too important to just leave it to chance and just think, oh, there's some blocks out over there. Yeah, they're going to sort of explore maths. It's really important that we're modelling vocabulary, that we're modelling concepts and how things work, and then giving the children time to go and explore that by themselves. So giving them time to go and play in the water, in the sand area, watching their play, and only sort of intervening if we think we can enhance their play and their mathematical understanding. But it's really important that they've got time to explore and to make their own discoveries and to put what we've given them in that teacher input into practice. And that's the part that can look a little bit scary if you're not used to how early years works, because there can be children in the sand sieving, there can be children pouring water from container to container in the water area, there could be people rolling cars down ramps, and it just looks like a big mess if you don't understand early years. But equally, I've seen it done really badly as well, where it's literally like a free for all, like just continuous provision. It's called that, but it's not really thought through. We need to think really carefully about what we're putting in our continuous provision to make sure the children have got those opportunities to enhance their mathematical understanding after the teacher input.
Yeah, there should be a link, shouldn't there? A sort of a
Yeah,
visible link, if you know what you're looking for, between the learning objective in maths for that week, perhaps, or that fortnight, or whatever it is, and the things that the children can access in the environment as well, and some thought put into that. So, just going back to the maths session, I know there's not one set, as there isn't for the rest of school, there isn't one set way of doing things, but would it be unreasonable to expect some sort of direct teaching, as you say? How long would that what's an appropriate, we're not doing an hour lesson, are we, sat at tables,
no,
getting the manipulatives out and then working on a worksheet, as you say. So
yeah.
what might an appropriate session look like?
I think it's important to bear in mind that it very much depends on the cohort. You might have a cohort of children with lots of summer-born children, so they're starting in September and they've just turned 4. You might have boy heavy, as it's important with every year group, but especially important in the early years because we see such a big change within that year that they're with us. So it's important that we work at their pace. Um, and make it as practical as possible to start with. So in the autumn term, when the children are starting, the adult input might be in small groups as we're getting to know them. We know that we can learn so much from observing children in their play. So standing back, watching, asking questions to assess what they know, and then planning our sort of adult led interventions after that. So starting with group activities, small group activities that are very practical, and then gradually throughout the year building up to whole class input. And that doesn't have to be children sitting on the carpet for 15-20 minutes listening to the teacher. It could be in the outdoor area. It could be, if you're lucky enough to have a forest school, it could be that the teacher input is in the forest school area. It might be that you go into the hall to do some physical activity for the teacher input that for that session. It might be on the carpet. It might be getting children up and moving around. It's important to know that children of this age, they need things to be practical. They need to have hands-on experiences. They're not
Yeah,
concrete learners.
And again,
Sorry.
I would argue that doesn't doesn't stop when they get to 5 years old, and it's equally
Yeah.
important all the way through, really. But totally take your point. Crucial at that age. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there's no expectation that children record their work in a written way, is there?
So there isn't. However, we know that we know where we want to get our children to so that they can access Key Stage 1 effectively
Yeah,
and be successful. So we know that we want to get them there. And also, as our children develop that understanding of numbers to 10, for example, naturally there is a progression where they will start to record and they'll want to start to record in a written way most of the time. So it might be to start with pictures, drawing pictures to represent the number of hops that they've heard or something like that. And then naturally, the natural progression is to then use a number to represent the number of pictures that they've drawn. So there is that natural progression that you would expect to see. So although there's no formal expectation that they should be recording in a written format by the end of reception, it would be an injustice to them to not introduce it when they're ready and then send them off to year 1. And you also won't want to be that year 1 teacher.
no, yeah, absolutely, yeah, yeah. As we were saying before, every year group has its own challenges, doesn't it? But the
Yeah.
start of year 1 and that transition can be particularly tricky, I think. He says, having never done that. But year 2 was the youngest year group that I taught, Michelle. I really enjoyed it, but uh, EYFS was a foreign land to me, really, until the changes to that framework came in, and then as a maths lead, I spent more time trying to understand things down there, and I was really lucky to work with a brilliant EYFS team at my school. We were 2 form entry, so and we had a nursery, so there was a group of adults there, two teachers in reception and a teacher in nursery, but also the additional adults as well, you know, the TAs who just did a fantastic job in that environment, as you say, of looking for those opportunities and recognizing the opportunities as they arise to enhance, to use your learning, to use your vocabulary, enhance the learning. It's really important, isn't it, to make sure that all those adults are using the consistent vocabulary and the correct terminology, and modeling things in the way that you would hope the teacher would be modeling it to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The adults in an early years classroom and earlier setting are the most valuable resource you'll have. And as I know, higher up in the school, the main teaching tends to fall on the teacher. In reception, quite although the teacher has overall responsibility, quite often it's an equal sort of balance of adult input, because every adult in that room, if you're lucky enough to have more than one adult, but even just one adult, it's so important that you're consistent with the messages that you're giving to the children, and you're both skilled and trained in how to enhance the children's learning in their play as well.
And as if it is a maths lead who happens to be listening to this, I think it's really important to have an understanding of what training all the adults have had actually in that regard in maths, because and this is a slight sweeping generalization, but from my experience, I know that sometimes teaching assistants feel less secure with maths perhaps than they do with English. Again, not all of them, but I think there's some research that backs that up actually. And we want to make sure, don't we, that they're spotting all the opportunities to enhance that learning that we possibly can. And our role as leaders is to help them to do that. And in order to help them to do that, they need to have the training, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they're vital. Yeah.
There is, if anybody is looking for particular training, we do have teach meets that run quite often on Twinkl. They are free with a subscription to access past recordings, so you can go back and have a look at some of those. And there's some brilliant ones for teaching assistants. In fact, I'm running one later this month in November for teaching assistants on vocabulary. We've also got on Twinkl PD an EYFS maths course that I created recently, which again goes through all of this in much more detail. So if you're interested in those things, those are great resources to access to find out a little bit more. Okay, so Michelle, can we just talk about assessment a little bit? What does that look like? We've said that we don't necessarily require children to record formally. We're not necessarily giving them end of unit tests, are we? That they've got to sit down and do in silence for 20 minutes. Although, of course, there is the reception baseline assessment, which has to be completed, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Yeah.
So would you just give us a little overview of what assessment looks like through the year in EYFS?
So you just mentioned the reception baseline. This year was the first year it was fully online, which I've heard was very challenging with network issues and Wi-Fi and things like that. So there's a mathematical section on there. So we're getting what we believe to be a good baseline understanding of where the children are starting when they join us in reception. However, I would argue that we actually learn more by just being with the children in those first few weeks. And the majority of the reception teachers that I've spoken to this year have said the same as well. So getting down onto the children's level and just watching them in their play. So watching how they communicate, asking them questions, watching how they explore maths in the environment. Simple things like snack time. There are 3 milks. Can you hand the milks out, please? Do they understand that 1 milk goes to each child? How many milks will they need? So the start of the year, although we have the baseline, I think we can learn a lot more by just being and getting to know and developing those relationships with our children to understand where they're
But
at.
that baseline is statutory, isn't it? So
It
that
is,
has to be
yeah.
completed.
Yeah, so it has to be completed in the first 6 weeks. And then that data can then be used to, dare I say, make predictions for where we would expect or want the children to be at the end of the year and so on, year 6 as well. And it provides, like it says, that baseline. If you're in a reception class where you have a nursery at the school as well, then in terms of assessment, you would hope that the reception teacher or the EYFS lead has been down into the nursery and observed the children during mathematical time there to gain an understanding before they start reception. You may even be doing the 2-year-old check if you've got 2-year-olds, which we know an increasing number of schools do have now. You may be doing the 2-year-old progress check, which has a basic sort of coverage of early maths. And
It's
then
just
the
fractions,
end.
decimals, and percentages, isn't it?
Yeah, it's quite
Yeah.
simple, yeah, for the
Yeah,
2-year-old. Yeah,
straightforward
we
stuff.
keep it simple, yeah. And then the end of reception, we obviously have our ELGs, so measuring the children on a set number of early learning goals and trying to, well, the government target is for 75% of children to meet a good level of development, and being successful in maths is part of a good level of development. So it's obviously a prime area.
Yeah, so it's one of the strands of the good level of development, which is not a set of criteria to teach against, is it?
No, it's not. No. Oh,
But
yes.
so you're not supposed to teach that, but the children are just assessed against it,
So
correct?
the children are assessed against it, and it's informal assessment, so teacher led. And what we're trying to do now is move away from having to gather loads and loads of information and evidence on if a child has met that GLD. So years ago, if you were moderated and you said a child was meeting GLD for maths or for number, for example, you would have to show videos of them engaged in maths in their play, evidence on post-it notes of things you've seen them do. We're trying now to move towards trusting the professional within that setting that their judgment is accurate. However, I was a little bit concerned when the new Ofsted framework said that GLD will form part of their conversations during the new inspections. But I've been assured by Sir Martin Oliver himself that actually it's just a starting point for a discussion, and schools will not be measured for their Ofsted inspections on that GLD score. Currently, around 66%, I think it is, are achieving GLD nationally. Obviously, that changes a lot depending on what area you're looking at. But by 2028, the target is 75%.
But yeah, because that 66%, so a third of children are leaving reception nationally without reaching a good
Mm.
level of development.
Yeah. And the risk is with that target and with Ofsted now using the GLD as a discussion point, there is that risk that we use the GLDs as our teaching focus, which would be absolutely the wrong thing to do. I can totally understand why people may feel like they need to do it because you're being measured on it. However, we need to make sure that the children have got all those fantastic practical opportunities to play and to learn through play in order to achieve that. And we do run the risk of that disappearing and just chasing that GLD if we're not careful.
So, just going back to what we are teaching, which is not against the GLD and is against the framework, with guidance from documents such as Development Matters. It's quite number heavy now in reception, particularly in terms of that framework. It felt like a lot of the less number based maths kind of went out the window when the framework was revised. Does that mean that you wouldn't ever teach, you know, what a triangle is or whatever in reception, or would you still expect to see that coming through in things like continuous provision?
Yeah. So we would still explicitly teach shape, space, measure, in reception, in nursery as well. Obviously, there is a massive focus, as you've said, on number and on counting, on composition, but it's equally as important that we're teaching a balanced curriculum within our math sessions, and that they're delivered through adult-led and through enhancements in continuous provision. So understanding more or less, if I give you a tiny spoon and I give you a big bucket, how are you going to fill the sand pit up with sand the quickest? Things like that. So really, really practical understanding, again, so the children are moving into Key Stage 1 with that hands-on experience to be able to move on to more formal learning, pattern, sorting objects by size. Again, this can be in the outdoor area. It could be within the classroom, in the forest school, in the hall. It doesn't need to be 30 children sat down listening to the teacher. And measures as well. So that could be in the sand tray, the water tray. It could be at snack time. It could be during a cooking activity. So making sure that we're taking advantage of those real life experiences to make maths really meaningful for the children. I was lucky enough a few years ago to have a teaching assistant that loved cooking. I'm not a fantastic cook, as if you ever speak to my family, they would back me up there. And she used to do a cooking activity every week, and all the children would cook once a week with her. And it was just a fabulous way of getting maths into the curriculum. The children absolutely loved it. I think they always used to bring in 50p a week or something for ingredients, and they'd take home some sort of cake or amazing creation that they'd done. But it was wonderful. It was absolutely fantastic.
Well, there's so much maths when it comes to baking and cooking, isn't there? Like, as you say, just from measures to reading
Yeah,
scales to just having some awareness of you know how much estimating, all those skills and all
yeah,
the language that comes with it as well. It's
yeah.
absolutely a fantastic way of doing that, and yeah, couldn't agree more. Michelle, we're running out of time a little bit. I know time flies. I just wanted to touch on this because I remember my first Ofsted as a maths lead, um, absolutely winging my way through it pretty much, and having to do a learning walk around the school. And this was before deep dives, but we were just having a look at maths because it was one of the areas of focus on the SIP. And I walked into reception and proudly showed off our maths area in reception, and spoke about how all the wonderful maths was here in this little area that was set aside for it, and then left again. My feelings about maths areas have changed somewhat over the years, but I'm interested, without trying to influence you, what your thoughts about the purpose, I suppose, of a maths area in a reception classroom? Because I don't know, I've just said that I'm not going to try and influence you, but I'm going to give you an example. I think it's great, isn't it, when you walk into any classroom and you see children reading, for example, helping themselves to books from the reading corner, and sitting and reading, even if they can't read, they're playing at reading, which is really important as well. And we had a brilliant role play area in our EYFS setting, and it was brilliant. The children loved going in there and dressing up. The maths area got very little love comparatively, I have to say. There were some really nice resources in there. Sometimes there were activities set up there, but it didn't really get the look in that those other areas did. I can't believe that's not because maths isn't fun, Michelle. But
Of course not.
so teachers are potentially spending a lot of time setting up these things and trying to make them look nice and inviting and things, but children aren't accessing them. What is the purpose of a maths area, do you think, for you in a reception classroom? And how should they be used?
I think there isn't a need anymore. I used to have a maths area, and like the example you've
I
just
mean, they
given,
were
it
obligatory,
was,
Michelle.
yeah,
Yeah,
of
somebody
course.
would come in and tick off on the box, "Yep, we can see your maths area."
Yeah, you are a good teacher. You have a maths area. Yeah, and it's
Exactly.
Instagrammable. Fantastic. Yeah, lovely. We don't need to have a maths area because we know that maths happens everywhere, and it should be happening in all of the areas of provision. And if it isn't, then I think we need to ask ourselves why, and that needs to be a focus for the adults to ensure that we're enhancing all of the areas. How many books can you read in the book corner, or how many bricks can you, which is the tallest tower in the role play area? We've got 2 customers, do they both have a knife and fork, or whatever it needs to be? In my last classroom, I had sort of like a resource shelf that had we had like a measuring stick, we had sticks of different sizes, some dice. It was more of an area that the children could go to get things to take to other areas if they wanted to. So if they had built a new road for a car and they thought, I wonder how long that is, they could go and choose something to measure it with. I'm going to use a stick, I'm going to use some of this string and measure how long it is. I think that's what we need, rather than a maths area and saying, if we're doing maths, it's going to be in this area and this is what we're going to do and we're going to count like this. It needs to be everywhere, and making sure that, and I know it's hard when you've spent ages setting up a classroom, but making sure that the children know that they can move things from area to area is really important. Fair enough, you might not want to be taking buckets of sand into the writing area, but making sure that they can go and access a ruler or a number line or anything they want to and take it to their play with them.
And as you say, if they've seen these things modelled by the teacher or by an adult as well in a lesson, then they're more likely, aren't they, to go and access them later. So if they've already had a play with them, but if they've already used them, played with them, explored them, whatever, in a lesson modelled by the teacher, and then they have access to them, they're more likely to then want to make use of them, surely.
Of course, yeah. And having
Absolutely, and I think that's very much the conclusion that I've come to over the years, that going in and seeing a lovely maths area doesn't necessarily mean that there's any maths happening at all. Equally, going in and not seeing a maths area doesn't mean that there isn't loads of maths happening, all around. And the skill is in recognising those moments and sort of making the most of them, really. But if there is a purpose for having a maths area, I think it is exactly what you've said, as a way to promote, the resources that we have, the things that we can do, the things that we can use, and children knowing where they can go to get those things if they want to use them. Well, Michelle, we're out of time for this, the first of many of your. This may become your podcast at some point, but yeah, probably. It's only a matter of time. But we are going to have to wrap it up there for today. But I think for me, what really has stood out is that early maths isn't about rushing children into formal learning. It's about giving them space, modelling language, providing experiences to make sense of the world mathematically. And whether you're a maths lead who's just dipping your toe into EYFS, or an early years practitioner who wants to connect with the rest of the school, hopefully this has given you some ideas that you could take back and talk to your team about. Michelle, thank you so much for sharing your insight. I've learned lots myself today, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to maybe revisit this and go on a slightly deeper dive. Sorry if that's triggering for anyone, but into a particular area of maths in EYFS at some point. But it's been great to talk to you. Thanks, Michelle. Absolute pleasure. And if you have enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to give the Primary Maths Podcast a follow on your usual platform. Share it with a colleague who might find it useful. And Becky and I will be back on Friday with an After Maths episode. But for now, thank you very much for listening.